In other islands in the South Pacific, people have abandoned farms, they've abandoned villages because of these infestations of ants. And we know from recording some of the higher densities on the island where the ants have been the longest, that the ants can reach a density of 20,000 ants per square meter. So if you just think of an area about this big, 20,000 ants, they can live comfortably with that level of population. So it's not, even though it's sort of like, oh, well, we've had fire ants on the Big Island for a long time, you know, we just need to learn to live with it. That's really not what's happening. In terms of invasion biology, we're still really at the beginning of this invasion, and it can get much worse if we don't do something to intervene. So, to talk a little bit about the ants themselves, the Latin name is Wasmannia arropunctata. They're arboreal ants, which means they live in the trees. They use the trees as highways. They sort of can go 3D all over the place. And what they're not builders. They're not nest builders. They're not digging in the ground. Okay, that's not where you're going to find them. The Hawaii Ant Lab, who we get a lot of our research from, they say they're lazy ants because they don't build. They just move in. They're looking for a little space where they can get some moisture and get some shade, and they want to live in that little space. That's all they need. Okay, so you're not going to find them digging around in the ground. You're going to find them in little cracks and crevices like rock walls or living in tea plants, that kind of stuff. And the way that they reproduce is that the queen, you know, just like a colony insect, they have a queen who lays all the eggs. The queen will actually lay a queen egg. And that queen egg forms another queen. She will move a little bit away from the original colony and she'll take some workers with her, and those two colonies will stay in contact with each other. And then slowly but surely they keep doing this. And so they're budding. And all of this forms a super colony. So it's not one colony of ants with a queen that you're trying to find like you might experience with some other kinds of insects. This is sort of a web or a matrix that you're thinking about with lots of queens and lots of workers all working cooperatively. So when you're thinking about how to treat these ants, you really have to keep that in mind. You're not just looking for one nest. You got to think about it's all over the place. The nests are actually really small. You can peel back the moss on a tree and you can find a nest under there. This is a picture of an entire colony in one macnut shell. This is all larvae and eggs. They're white. So they can fit in really, really tiny spaces. So trying to treat them by finding the nests is not really going to be an effective way to do it. The history of fire ants here on the Big Island is that they were brought here unintentionally on nursery plants in the 90s. Unfortunately, by the time they were detected and they started doing surveys to see where they were, they found them, they first identified them in 1999. By 2002, they had found that there were populations everywhere from Kapoho all the way out to Lapahoehoe. So by that point, it was already too late to eradicate them. Unfortunately for us, sometimes that happens with invasive species, and at this point, we're now trying to manage it. The Hawaii Ant Lab was formed in the early 2000s to do research into how to treat these ants. So they've been working on this for over 10 years, trying to find a way to treat the ants in Hawaii, to be able to get authorization to create special formulations of products that we could use in Hawaii. So we're fortunate now that we have a lot more information than we did back in 2002. Some people might remember ants well before the 90s, getting stung by fire ants. Well, it turns out we have more than one species of fire ant in Hawaii. There's another ant that's been here much longer, probably since the 1960s. It's called tropical fire ant, also an invasive species, but these are ground nesting ants. And so these guys will form those mounds that you look for, and you usually don't notice these until you step on it. And then you get the ants biting your ankles and your feet. That's probably not fire ants. These are larger and faster moving. The little fire ant, on the other hand, is the one that you'll feel sometimes falling on you. So when you're getting bit here and in your neck, right, this is probably little fire ant. So the first thing that you want to do is survey. And we actually brought kits here tonight that you can use to take home and survey your property. I highly encourage you, even if you think you don't have fire ants, survey to be sure. We have spent the entire summer going out to neighborhoods from Honolulu all the way down to Kalapana, and we have gone up to people's houses, asked if we could survey, and they said, sure, but I don't have fire ants. And then we come back with all of our sticks covered in fire ants. So And the thing is that a lot of times, by the time you actually notice them, they've been there a long time. They start out really quietly. And most people say, I got fire ants. My neighbor brought some building materials last week, so this must be now I have fire ants. Probably not. It's probably several months ago, whenever the incident was, they brought them in, because by the time you notice them, they've been there a while. So we really, really encourage you, don't assume just because you haven't been stung that you don't have fire ants. You really need to do those surveys, and you need to encourage your neighbors to do the surveys. So please take home some kits tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end about how to apply those, okay? If you do have ants, if you're not sure if the ants are fire ants or not, we can do an ID for you. The Department of Agriculture can do an ID for you. There's lots of places you can bring your ants in and say, are these fire ants? And we'll look at them under a microscope and we'll confirm for you if they're a little fire ant or not. So if you do end up with ants, but you're not sure, are these the right ones? Go ahead and let us know. I really want to encourage you to do the survey, no matter what you think is going on, just to be sure. Now, I'm going to get into talking about, if you do have the ants, how to treat them. But I want to stress that we are just going to really present one treatment approach to make it kind of simple, but there are multiple ways to effectively treat for little fire ants. There's not just one way. There's different ways you can do it depending on your landscape, depending on your goals. So it's not a, okay, this is it kind of a situation. Like, only do this, and that's the only thing you can do. So you'll hear people say, well, I've been doing this or that, and it works for me. If you're doing something and it works, that's great. The one thing I want to stress is that there's no one and done. So whatever treatment you use, you need to do it repetitively. Okay? You need to be on a plan, and you need to schedule that plan ahead of time and stick to it. We recommend, and this is based on years of research, that your treatments come every 4 to 6 weeks. You really got to get in that 4 to 6 week window. If you wait till 8 weeks, the ants can actually rebuild their colony to previous population levels, and your treatment is for naught. So it's really important that you stick to that timetable. So that's kind of the key. So you'll hear people say, well, I used Amdro, and the ants went way down, and then 3 months later they were back. Gotta do it again. Can't wait 3 months. It's gotta be 4 to 6 weeks. So whatever your treatment plan is that you choose to use, and we can talk about some different ones, that's the key, okay? You don't have to do exactly what we're telling you to do, but you do have to do that treatment at a regular rate. Something I don't want you to do is run out to Home Depot and just grab the first thing you see that says fire ants. There are actually many species of fire ants in the world, and they're not all the same, and they're not attracted to the same baits, and some of them are ground nesting, they're all different. So if you're just buying a product that says fire ants, it may not be for Wasmannia or puntada, okay? So you don't want to just rely on that. Make sure that you're really focusing on what products work for this species. And again, we do have a lot of research on that. So what we're going to talk about tonight, the treatment that we recommend, is a 2-pronged approach where we start with Tango, which is an insect growth regulator. We'll talk about that in a second. And then you followed it up with a Toxicant. The reason that we want to do it this way is because with Tango, I'm going to go to this really quick. Tango is an insect growth regulator which affects the reproductive system of the queens. So it does not have an impact on the worker ants. What will happen is the worker ants will pick up your bait with the Tango in it, take it back to the colony, feed it to the queens, feed it to the larvae. The queen starts to develop sort of she becomes sterile, where she's not really laying as many eggs. Those eggs that she does lay turn into deformed ants. They're not effective in doing the work they need to do for the colony. So eventually, there's not enough ants replenishing the colony as the older ants die off. So we really want to think about, okay, how are we going to long-term control these ants? The downside of Tango is that it takes about 3 to 4 months for the ants to finish out their life cycle. So when you're using Tango, sometimes people will say, I used it a second time, I used it a third time, but the ants came back. I gave up after 3 times. Well, 3 times is like just when you're like getting there, okay? You don't want to stop because you need to make sure that all of those ants die off. It takes about 3 to 4 months for all of those worker ants to die off. And in the meantime, she can't make ants to replenish them. During that time that you're waiting for the ants to die off, you may have a situation where you're being bitten by the ants in your house. So we get a lot of people that tell us, oh, my bathroom or my kitchen, they like to be around the water, so you see that a lot. You might want to reach for the can of Raid, or you grab your orange oil or your peppermint oil or whatever it is that you use, and that will kill the ants. That'll just kill the ones you see. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you have to do to be comfortable. But that's not going to have an impact on your ant problem. It's going to solve your ant problem for today. It's not going to solve your ant problem long term, because what you are seeing is only about 10% of the colony. You're not seeing most of the colony. And the ants that they're sending out are the most expendable ants. They're ants at the end of their life cycle that if they don't come back, that's okay. We're gonna make more, it's fine. So if you're only killing those ants, you're not gonna have a long-term impact on the colony. If you use the Tango, you get to the point where the queen ant no longer has workers to serve her. Now the workers die off after 3 to 4 months. The queen can live for years. But at that point, she's coming out of the nest, and she's going to be looking for food on her own. We recommend you can now switch to a toxicant where appropriate. A toxicant is actually a poison that will impact the ants. It's going to kill the worker ants. So if there are any worker ants hanging around, this will kill them. It also will kill the queens. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. You start with the weakening the colony, with the Tango, with the insect growth regulator, and you follow up with something to really knock them off when they're down. Okay? There's a couple different ways that this product comes. Now I talked about Tango. I just want to be clear. I talked about Tango, which it's actually the active ingredient is methoprene. This is the only product that is labeled as an insect growth regulator. That's for Hawaii. This is why I'm using the brand name. Usually I like to talk about the active ingredients, because brands can have a lot of different products, especially like Amdro has a lot of different products. So I want to make sure that we're communicating, looking for this. But Tango's pretty much the only one that is approved to be mixed into this gel bait that was developed by the Hawaii Ant Lab. The nice thing about this, we're going to be using those 2 things the ants aren't getting from their little farmed insects. We're going to be using protein, and we're going to be using fat. Okay? Those are things the ants are out looking for. By using this protein and fat and mixing it with the Tango, you are actually going to be baiting the ants and saying, come here, come and get this. Take it back, feed it to your queen. So that's how we attract them and get them to deliver the stuff to the queen. That stuff is a liquid, you mix it into a bait. At that point, when you've done 6 treatments of Tango and it's time to switch, do that 1-2 punch, it's time for number 2. When we go to the toxicant, there's a couple different options for toxicant baits. One that can be mixed into that gel bait, that can be sprayed up into the trees and all that kind of stuff, is called Provant. And this is actually not labeled for use in fruit trees. So that's one of the limitations. If you have a lot of fruit trees, you want to stick to the Tango. Tango you can use in fruit trees, you can use in vegetable crops. It's labeled for use in any of those kinds of situations. If you have, a lot of banana trees, you just want to keep going with the Tango, okay? Now, if you have other ornamental plants, lots of areca palms or something like that, that would be a good time to switch to the Provant, okay? You can spray that right into the palm trees, no problem. Safe for use around your pets, safe chickens, no problem. Dogs and cats, no problem, okay? There's another way that you can deliver the toxicant. Some of you might have heard Amdro is really popular, Siesta is really popular. These are actually granules. They come as little corn grits, and they use the oil to attract the ants. The ants come out, they find these little corn grits, they suck the oil out with the active ingredient, they take it back, and they feed it to the queen, and that will kill the queen and colony. Thing about toxicants that you need to be careful of, if you don't have enough of it, if the ants don't get enough of it and they get sick, but they don't die, they will communicate to the rest of the colony, don't touch that stuff. And it takes about a month for them to forget. So you gotta be sure. That's the nice thing about starting with the Tango. They haven't figured out birth control yet. They haven't figured out what's going on. So you start with the Tango, you're not gonna end up in that situation, and then by the time that you're giving them the toxicant 6 months down the line, they're stressed. So there are less of them and they're more likely to take your bait. Okay? There's another type of product called a barrier treatment. Most commonly, you'll hear Telstar or Upstar, Ortho Home Defense. Those are sprays or, again, granules, but they work differently than the baits. Okay, you always want to be using a bait. That's your main thing that you're going to be using. But what's really nice is if you have ants coming into your house and foraging in your house, most likely they're living outside. They're just coming in, but they're not living in, most of the time they're not living in your house. You can use one of these barrier treatments around the foundation of your house, especially focus on things like water pipes that are coming into your house, electrical lines coming into your house. They use these things as highways. So you can do this around your house, and it will keep the ants from coming in while you're doing the bait outside. So they're just making sure that they're not coming into your house, they're staying outside, okay? You don't want to be doing this all around your yard at the same time you're baiting, because at that point, if your ants are picking up your bait and then they walk across an area where you put the barrier treatment, they just die and they don't get the bait back to the queen. So you don't want to use this all around your property. This is really for very focused areas where you're making like an invisible fence that the ants can't cross. Okay. This also, like I said, it comes in a liquid that you can spray, and it also comes in a granule form. So if you have a neighbor that you think might not be treating, or you have an empty lot next to you that you are like, I don't want to put the money into treating that, you can actually spread these granules, create that invisible fence, and keep the ants from coming onto your property. Okay? The goal of treatment is not to do it forever. I said you have to do it on a time schedule, and you have to do it multiple times, but I don't want you to do it forever. Our goal is that after about a year, you should be down to 0 detections. You should be down to where you're not really seeing the ants, or where you're able to go, I don't have ants here, 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 here. I have some ants over there. I'm just going to treat over there now, right? You want to get down after you've done a year of the whole property.